For generations, women suffered silently with few treatment options and fertility concerns. Today, 1 in 3 will be diagnosed with fibroids. 80% of women of African descent have fibroids. Our numbers are too great for this story to continue. Will you join me in creating a new story, a movement? Let's let the world know that we are empowered, resilient, and focused. Hi, I'm Sateria. I faced fibroids at the age of 26. Freedom from fibroids will mean that women around the world will no longer have to suffer. Let's create a global movement together. Welcome to Fibroid Awareness Month 2021. Our ambassadors are joining us. Oh my goodness. We would love for you to meet our ambassador team. We have 22 chapters around the country, and they're joining us now. You'll learn more about the work that they do and how we are striving to make a difference in your community. It's so much fun to watch the map fill in and share with you how to connect with us. Today, you will meet our ambassadors from Texas, Pennsylvania, and Jamaica.
Hi, I'm Belinda Monroe Gardner, your ambassador for the Houston chapter of the Fibroid Foundation. I'm coming to you from my favorite place, the Theater District. And I want to talk to you about something that's near and dear to me. For many years, I suffered with the debilitating disease of fibroids, but now I call myself a survivor. And I want to walk with you along your journey because you don't have to suffer in silence.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Agyeman, and I am the Philadelphia Fibroid Foundation Ambassador for Philadelphia. These iconic steps behind me are the art museum steps that you probably have seen in the Rocky movies. I have been struggling with fibroids probably now for maybe 9 years, but thankfully I have a great community base through the Fibroid Foundation that I have met incredible women that have touched me in many ways and have really helped me kind of cope with what it is that I'm dealing with. So if you need a friend, if you need some information, please feel free to reach out to the Fibroid Foundation, especially the Philadelphia chapter. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marjorie, and I am the ambassador for the Jamaica chapter of the Fibroids Foundation, and I'm here at the beautiful Devon House, known for the delicious ice cream. Another fun fact about Devon House, that it was owned by the first Black millionaire who was a Jamaican. And so next month is Fibroids Awareness Month, and so we will have a number of activities planned for you. So if you're suffering from fibroids, reach out to me. I'm here for you.
In the spring, we did a social media campaign where we asked our followers, if you could ask one question about fibroids, what would it be? Many of you responded with excellent questions, and we are going to answer them today. Today, we're presenting You Asked, Here's the Facts, part 1 of a 2-part series. In the first segment today, we're excited to present Valerie Agyeman, a registered dietitian specializing in women's health and founder of our alliance partner, Flourish Heights. She will share some wonderful dietary information. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special segment. I'm here today with Valerie Agyeman from Flourish Heights. Valerie is a women's health dietitian. She's also a wonderful partner to the Fibroid Foundation, and she always provides us with the absolute best information and insights on nutrition and so much more. Earlier this year, we had the pleasure of participating in her annual Bloom event, which you absolutely must sign up for. And so today, we're going to answer some questions with Valerie. Valerie, welcome.
Hi, Sateria. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
So excited to be here.
We are too. So I thought I'd jump right in. It's Fibroid Awareness Month, and I had a few questions for you that I'm sure will be really helpful to our listeners. So I wondered, there are billions of us around the world who menstruate. Are there unique nutritional needs that we have during our periods?
Absolutely, yes. There are nutritional needs around our period and just throughout our entire menstrual cycle as a whole. And so there are several things to take note of. The first thing is to know that your body needs more energy when menstruating. So your menstrual cycle, it increases your metabolic rate, which is really the amount of energy you're expending while at rest. And so the weeks leading up to your period, you're burning more calories than really any time of the month. You know, you may find that you are more hungry around this time, which is completely normal. So no need to feel guilty if you are having, you know, some cravings here and there. Think of it like this, you know, we need food to fuel our body for many of the functions that it has. And when it comes to our reproductive health, you better believe it's constantly working hard. And also just, you know, understanding that there's a change in our hormone levels throughout the month. And so, you know, that's why it really does affect your hunger levels. So if you are tracking your menstrual cycle, which I highly encourage you to do that, you can definitely tune into your body a little bit and you'll really start to notice that you may be getting hungry around certain parts of your body. And so when you are getting hungrier, you know, you may find that you're craving a chocolate bar, you know, foods that like give you that comfort. And so I think the body, it really does crave those like mood boosting foods because, you know, oftentimes throughout our cycle, we may feel, you know, whether it's moody or sad or cranky or whatever the case is. And so, you know, going for those foods that kind of give you that that energy and kind of boost in the serotonin, the feel good hormones, that's usually a result of what's going on in the body. And also our blood sugar, they are changing around the time of the month as well. And so your period does affect your blood sugar level, right? And so because of this, women are more responsive to insulin. Now, insulin is that hormone that does regulate the amount of glucose in the blood. And so you're more responsive to insulin, most women, and when you're on your period. And so you know, just be mindful of the foods that you're consuming. If you find that you're often craving all the things that are sugary and salty, just, you know, be more conscious of how it makes you feel and just adjust to it, adjust as it makes sense to you. But also think of like, you know, balancing with more fiber, more protein. And I guess the other thing to just make note of as well is that, you know, our body may be fatigued around the time of the month. And so changes in the diet during your period are really like a natural response to the fatigue. And so some women who, for example, have fibroids or, you know, may or, you know, have heavy periods. And so with that being said, that will greatly affect your energy level. I think it's just important to make note of your iron levels. And so just kind of your body going through all the things, working hard, and, you know, as you're trying to carry out your daily activities too, it's perfectly okay to eat around, you know, during your cycle. You know, just kind of keep in mind getting more whole foods into your eating routine. So yes, lots of, you know, unique nutritional changes when you're on your period.
I'm sure everyone is taking notes feverishly because that response was packed with information. And you helped to explain the chocolate cravings, among others. um, are there any foods that we should be staying away from during our periods?
Well, you know, like I said, I mean, certain foods, they can definitely help to reduce and manage some of the symptoms you may be feeling during, you know, your period or just your cycle as a whole. And so I want to talk more about like what we can do
Okay.
rather than focusing on the negatives. I mean, of course, our bodies are all different. We all have unique nutritional needs as well. And so I think it's number one, you have to make sure you're eating enough. A lot of us are thinking restriction and, you know, following the next weight loss diet or whatever the case is, but your body is really sensitive to when you're not putting a lot of, energy into your body. And it's just not going to help your hormones to really thrive as much as it wants to. So just simply, making sure you're starting the day off with a nourishing, balanced breakfast, get your blood sugar stable. That's one of the best ways to support your hormones. Not skimping on your healthy fats. So you'll find your avocado and, fatty fish like sardines and salmon, all those kinds of foods, nuts and seeds. These fats are pretty much the precursors to your hormones. And so a lot of times we hear fat and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm cutting that out. But I think it's just important to keep in mind that our body does operate off of, fats. And so just be mindful of the types of fats that you're consuming on a regular basis. Other things that you can do, eating more plant rich, because most of the time, a lot of us are not getting enough whole foods into our eating routine. And so when I say whole foods, I'm talking about your fruits and your veggies, your nuts, your seeds, your whole grains. And so think about ways you can increase that. Cruciferous vegetables. Since it's Fibroid Awareness Month, a lot of this, so as we know, fibroid is a very estrogen dependent condition. And so it's very important that if, you do have a higher estrogen levels in your body, think about the foods that may help, our livers to metabolize estrogen in a very efficient way. So your cruciferous veggies, you'll find that in your cauliflower and the kale and, the cabbage, all those types of foods. Sateria, I don't know if you love those foods, but I do. There's so many delicious ways to prepare it. And so I'm always preaching about that. Our gut and our hormones are super, super connected. And so if your gut is out of line, it may impact your hormones. So think of getting more fiber in. If you're not having bowel movements regularly, that's something to be, to keep an eye on, because we really want to make sure that we are eliminating any excess estrogen out of the body. And so, if, like I said, if you're not getting enough of that fiber in, definitely make sure you're doing that. And other gut tips that you can just keep an eye on in your eating routine is getting more probiotics into your eating routine. So your kimchi and your kombucha, kefir, fermented foods, and just eating a variety of foods. A lot of the times we get stuck into this like routine of just eating like the same foods all the time, but our gut really does love it when we are, getting some variety in. So I would definitely, recommend that. And working with a registered dietitian is, super, super key too. But since you did talk about the negative side of things, I will say, alcohol, if you are someone that drinks a lot of alcohol, just being mindful of that, because if we're constantly drinking alcohol, it can interfere with, several hormonal processes, whether that's blood sugar control to even the way our body metabolizes estrogen. But I think most of all, just kind of listening to your body and make the best choices for you. I know there's so much information out there on what to do, what not to do when it comes to like your diet. And so listen in, if certain foods make you feel bad, when you're having your period, or I guess worse than your PMS symptoms or whatever the case is, just kind of keep an eye on that. Think about, how does this food make my energy levels feel? Or how does this food make my, my mood feel? So just, you know yourself the best. And so it's all about, doing what works for you. And, in addition to that, looking at your sleep and your stress levels, those all do impact, our hormones as well.
So many fantastic tips. And I'm so glad that you mentioned bowel health, because if your bowels are really stagnant, that can put pressure on your uterus, which can cause pain and other symptoms. And so eating healthy and eating a good balanced diet of whole foods can also help with fibroid symptoms. So again, you really led us in the right direction, as you usually do. I learn so much when I speak with you, and I'm glad that you mentioned preparing foods and the foods that you like to prepare, because perhaps we could have you back for another segment on preparing some of those foods that you love to kind of build on this conversation. I would love to do that. So
Would love
Valerie, you
that.
always develop so much wonderful programming, and you have such an engaging manner and engaging audience. And so what else can we look forward to with you and Flourish Heights for this year?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, last year I just think about all the burnout that I had from all the things that my team and I were working out, but I'm working on. And so this year, once a year, you joined us at our Bloom event earlier this year. And so in the fall, we do like a condensed version. We're just having, a panel discussion, topic and details to be announced. But if you do follow us on Flourish Heights on Instagram, you can definitely, stay tuned with that. But we just launched a podcast a couple weeks ago, and it is the Flourish Heights podcast. And really, it's just another space to break through topics surrounding, periods and women's nutrition, body awareness, self-care, and just much more. And it's really just to help us, flourish and be the best versions of ourselves. And so we have that as a resource in addition to our blog, on our website, flourishheights.com, the content we put out, through Twitter and Facebook and our Instagram account. And then you can follow us, on our quarterly newsletter. You can subscribe to that. We're just trying to simplify nutrition. It's like really hard out there to navigate what to do, especially if you have, conditions that, are impacted by, hormones. And so, if you are struggling out there, work with a registered dietitian who specializes in women's health nutrition. And, we're trained in doing this kind of work. And so working with somebody can really just help them individualize, your unique nutritional needs, and help you just thrive in your overall health and wellness.
That is awesome. And let me tell you, if you attend a Flourish Heights event, you will be just amazed because the content is world class. I always take tons of notes, and I encourage you to follow Valerie and Flourish Heights. And Valerie, I can't thank you enough for being with us today and helping us make this an amazing Fibroid Awareness Month. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, and keep up with all the amazing work that you're doing, Sateria. It's so needed. I appreciate you.
Thank you. For the second half of today's program, we are featuring a Q&A with Dr. Elizabeth Stewart of Mayo Clinic. In March of this year, the Fibroid Foundation and the Campion Fund presented a Fibroid Summit. During the summit, Dr. Stewart, professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Mayo Clinic College of Medicine and Science, did this Q&A segment that answered many of the questions you asked. So we wanted to share it with you. You will also get to see Dr. Stewart in You Asked, Here's the Facts, Part 2. We hope this information is valuable and helpful. Let's get started.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Dr. Stewart. How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited. I, as usual, got lots of insights from your talk, so I appreciate you delving so deeply into the research and your practice. And I know that our listeners got a lot out of it. And I have a ton of questions, so I'll just start off right away. Okay. So you touched on bulk symptoms, and I think that term bulk symptoms is somewhat of a mystery to many women. They may be enduring them, but aren't particularly sure what it is exactly. Can you describe bulk symptoms in a little bit more detail and like how that might display?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question and I think it's a big change in the research community as well. We used to just focus on heavy menstrual bleeding as the only important symptom. But when the fibroids enlarge, they can press on the bowel, they can press on the bladder, they can make you look pregnant when you're not. You can have feelings of heaviness and discomfort. Sometimes you have severe pain, but other times it's a more chronic type of pain. And so there's a lot more to fibroids than just heavy menstrual bleeding. And the other thing about bulk symptoms is that they can be there every day of the month. Now, some of them do get worse at certain points in your menstrual cycle, but they can occur any day of the month. And they also, again, are kind of common things. So sometimes they get ignored, that you say, well, I've gained a little weight and my clothes aren't fitting. And so people will say, well, try losing a couple of pounds and don't even investigate. Is it the fibroid? The pressure and the discomfort are just things many women have had so long that they just feel like they have to live with it.
I appreciate that explanation, and I think it's very helpful. I think my takeaway would be to just really not glaze over anything that's happening in your body and just try to pay close attention to those types of symptoms. So as a follow-up question to that, as you describe the architecture, if you will, of the pelvis, when women are experiencing heavy menstrual bleeding, there's so many things taking place that can take place, I will say, not with every patient, but for some patients like me who experience heavy menstrual bleeding, it's so painful. And I think one of the questions before I came to know more was why, what is taking place with the arteries and the pain that you feel through your legs and your pelvis that makes you just feel so awful when we're experiencing heavy menstrual bleeding and losing a lot of blood. I know that's a layered question.
Well, and I think we don't have a complete answer because we haven't done a lot of research on fibroid-related pain. So I think that's why it was so exciting to see the recent paper on relugolix, to see that pain was an important endpoint of that trial as well. So I think that there's a couple of things going on. So most women, even without fibroids, have some pain with their menstrual cycles. So there are certain molecules like prostaglandins that are involved in shedding of the uterine lining. So part of it is that. That there also appears to be an element of ischemia or loss of blood supply. So when the top layer of the uterine lining is shed, the arteries that supply it kind of go into spasm. So some women feel kind of a twisting kind of pain that I've sometimes called like a heart attack in your uterus. People kind of get the sense of what a heart attack is supposed to feel like, with pressure and sometimes squeezing pain. And there is some evidence that parts of the uterus don't get good blood supply during menstruation. The other thing is women with fibroids often pass clots that are pretty big in size. So just like women in labor have their cervix dilate and get pain when they have the cervix opening and something going through it, that can be part of the pain and the discomfort. And there's also contractions in the uterus. So just like contractions of labor can be felt. So I think that there's a lot of things that are going on in the uterus, and we've really concentrated more on the study of bleeding than we have on the pain related to fibroids. But I think it's something we need to pay more attention to, and to validate that women do have lots of different kinds of pain related to fibroids.
That's tremendously helpful, and I would like to bookmark for future discussions your comment on contractions and the impact of the cervix expanding for clots, because I know that pain is just tremendous. So thank you for that. So one of our questions from online was, does having multiple myomectomies affect fertility?
Yes, it probably does. So, and that's a real tough question. We didn't even get into the relationship between fibroids and pregnancy. So sometimes fibroids contribute to problems getting pregnant. Sometimes fibroid treatments contribute to not getting pregnant. And that there's some evidence that suggests that women are have improved fertility after a myomectomy, but not always. And I think that's one of the reasons why those of us that are fertility specialists and fibroid specialists are really trying to minimize the number of surgeries that we do and coordinate them with a woman's reproductive life plan. I think instead of just going in and automatically taking out fibroids surgically, we need to be looking at where she is in her reproductive lifespan, how important is pregnancy, how far away from thinking about pregnancy is she? Can we use something like a medication or a conservative procedure to temporize? So I think that there's a lot more that we can be doing, because I think that's one of the most difficult clinical scenarios for me to see as a woman who walks into my office. She's already had a couple of myomectomies. It's now that she wants to get pregnant and she's still got new fibroids. So unfortunately, surgery can eliminate fibroids that are there, but fibroids are not like the appendix. You don't take it out once and you're over and done with it, that it's more of a chronic problem, and trying to get your reproductive plans together with your fibroid plans is really critical.
That's helpful as well. I know you touched on fibroid growth and size as you approach menopause, and I think many may have the perception that fibroids just go away after menopause. Can you speak a little bit to managing fibroid symptoms through menopause, and if there's anything that women who maintain their uterus and have fibroids as they experience menopause, if there's anything that they should maybe look out for as it relates to, their feelings or symptoms that they may or may not have?
Yeah, since menopause by definition is not having periods, if your only fibroid symptom is heavy menstrual periods, if you can make it to menopause, then your problems are going to be solved. So I think that it's harder when you have pain or pressure, bulk, because the fibroids don't go away at menopause. They tend to shrink, and that's something that occurs over time. And there's some variability in how much shrinkage that you get. Some women get a lot, some women get none. And as I showed in that picture from the fibroid growth study, and Dr. Hendy alluded to it in his talk, there's a difference in pattern between Black women and white women. The growth of fibroids really starts to slow in white women as they approach menopause, but not so much in Black women. So I think that trying to figure out, is there a uterine-sparing treatment option that can tide you over to menopause, is a good question to be answering. And again, having good medical therapy is a good place for treatments close to menopause. Something like a uterine artery embolization can be a good treatment option. Again, for the woman who has just heavy menstrual bleeding, even a medicated IUD may be a good option. But the fact that, again, symptoms are variable is tough. And the second thing is, we don't always know when we're going to go into menopause. We kind of get a clue from family history, but I've had a couple of women who are ready to tear their hair out because they've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and they still kept on having that regular period. And I think that's one of the facts of fibroid life that's particularly unfair. most women assume that if you get your period early, at an early age, you finish early, but that's not the case. If you get your period early, you actually tend to have a menopause that's later. So that is clearly one thing where life is not fair to ladies with fibroids.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting. So for women considering a uterine artery embolization, are there certain, is everyone a candidate? Are there certain considerations that should be made, or certain conversations that they should be having with their provider to make that determination?
Yep. So uterine artery embolization works by cutting off the blood supply to the fibroids. So there are rare women who've had that happen naturally. So if your fibroid doesn't have good blood supply, you're not going to get good relief. The pellets go in the uterine artery. So if you have a fibroid that gets its blood supply from someplace other than the uterine artery, and particularly the cervix. So if you have a big fibroid arising from the cervix, it may not be treated with uterine artery embolization. That there are some fibroids that are so big that the symptom relief is decreased and the complication rate is increased. So I think you need to take that into consideration. And you also have to look at your age and, again, your plans for reproduction. That for women 45 and older, they may find that going through UAE tips them into menopause. And again, for some women, they want their natural hormones around as long as they can. Other women are having such heavy bleeding that being tipped into menopause, if they're already 52 or 53, sounds like a good idea. So I think that's important. And then I think the area of pregnancy is controversial. That, again, most people still say that women who want a future pregnancy shouldn't be going in the direction of uterine artery embolization. But there are thousands of women that have had successful deliveries following UAE. And again, some newer comparative data, like from the FEM trial, suggests that the success may even be similar to myomectomy. So I think it clearly requires a complex discussion, but I don't think it's an option that is completely closed off from the beginning for the woman who wants pregnancy.
Okay, that's good to know. So I have you mentioned emotions around fibroids, and I think that topic is so incredibly important, and it's not really explored. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about some of the things outside of the pelvic symptoms that we're experiencing, like pica, or other reactions that we have to the heavy menstrual bleeding and blood loss, and that really impact those emotions, because a lot of our viewers reach out to us asking if they're by themselves, if anyone else is experiencing these symptoms, and they feel very isolated and alone. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to the high percentages of women experiencing fibroid symptoms, and as a result, the emotional toll that it may or may not take.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I think there's actually two elements to it. So the first, is what you've suggested, is that that having fibroids and the pain, the functional impairment, the limitation of your activities can certainly lead to emotional symptoms. And again, it's not published yet, but there's some work on that coming out of Compare UF. So Dr. Nicholson may talk about it a little bit tomorrow. Is that does anxiety and fibroid, or anxiety and depression in women with fibroids get better when the fibroids are effectively treated? So I think that that's one of the key questions we've been looking at in that study. And you mentioned specifically pica, and I think people don't know what pica is, but it's a reaction to severe anemia where you're so iron deficient that you try to get your body to try to pick up that mineral. And so some people have behaviors where they crave ice and chewing ice, or sometimes even dirt or clay, trying to get to minerals. I think that women sometimes are so anemic that you wonder how they get to and from appointments, to and from work. I once had a lady who came to see me that had such a low blood count, the lab called me and asked me if it was blood, because it looked like it was some other fluid that was diluted. So I think that living with chronic anemia, chronic fatigue, chronic pain causes effects on your work, your personal relationships, your life goals. So I think all of that's important. But there's also another side, in that there's some evidence that emotions and particularly emotional traumas may actually be linked to an increased chance of fibroids. So I mentioned in my talk some of the thing that we're seeing with removal of the ovaries may be related to a history of abuse. There's some data that suggests that experience of racism may be linked to fibroids, and again, may be part of the health disparities of this disease. So I think that that there's a lot of complex interactions, and I think that that's one of the most gratifying things about working with women with uterine fibroids, is that once you can get to an effective treatment for women, they often go, gee, I don't even know how I lived like that. I've been putting up with those symptoms, that it's only now that I've had surgery or had UAE or gone on to medication that I realize how stressed and how terrible I was feeling, and I'm never going there again.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that sentiment. I know you've done extensive work in disparities, and I wonder if we know why women of African descent have such higher rates of uterine fibroids.
No, we don't. And that's really frustrating that, again, the earliest studies kind of looked at kind of reproductive and lifestyle factors. So things that might differ among races, like age at first pregnancy or things like that. That didn't seem to hold the key. That we then went, and when they started to identify fibroid genes, we thought, well, maybe African women and African American women have different genetics that explains it. And it looks like there's the same set of basic fibroid mutations that are present everywhere from Alabama to Finland, and that it doesn't seem to make a big difference. There may be a little bit of an impact with admixture and looking at percent of African ancestry in some studies. As Dr. El-Hendi mentioned, vitamin D levels may be part of the issue. And so I too check women with fibroids for vitamin D deficiency. That since I practice in Minnesota, both Black and white women tend to have vitamin D deficiency this time of year, since we're all bundled up to deal with the snow. But I think we don't really understand, and it's probably not one thing. It's probably not just vitamin D. It's probably not just genetics. It's probably multiple issues between, things like vitamin D, experience of racism, maybe even environmental issues. There's newer data that says environmental estrogens and environmental contaminants may be playing a role in fibroids. So disparities in housing patterns may be part of it as well. So I think it's likely to be multifactorial, but I think trying to make sure that we do study new treatments in populations that are most at risk is really important.
Yeah, and as we continue to analyze all of those factors, because I too truly believe that it's not just one thing. I love that slide that you showed that, kind of pointed toward the future and where we need to really kind of focus before a fibroid even forms. That really was informative to me. We have a question about diet. Is there any evidence that a vegetarian or a vegan diet is helpful to stop fibroids from returning?
So there's actually a lot of dietary information about fibroids, and a lot of it comes from the Black Women's Health Study. So that's one of the nice things, is that a lot of the data is specific for Black women. And nobody has really done an intervention trial where they took women on a more normal diet and put them on a vegan or a vegetarian diet to see if fibroids changed. But if you look at big population-based studies, having a diet rich in fruits and vegetables and low in red meats appears to be linked with decreased fibroid risk. And again, a lot of the stuff that also goes along with decreased risk of heart disease, decreased risk of cancer is good for fibroids as well. So fruits and vegetables are good. Red meat in large amounts is bad. Alcohol in significant amounts can be bad. So I think that healthy diet is good for a lot of things, but I can tell you I've seen also a lot of women with a strict vegetarian or vegan diet that still have significant fibroids. So it's not the only factor.
Yeah. So my last question that we got from online is, how do I know if a new treatment is the right one for me?
I think that's a complex question. You really need to talk to somebody that knows about treatments because, again, your particular symptoms, the size and number of your fibroids, the location of the fibroids, where you are in terms of thinking about pregnancy is important. So I do encourage women to do reading in advance of talking to a doctor so they can say, well, what about the new GnRH antagonists? Are they options for me? Could I have the Accessa procedure, which is radio frequency? Why am I not a good candidate for UAE or focused ultrasound? So you don't have to know the answers to those questions, but the more you can ask the questions, the more likely you are to get a full range of treatment options presented.
That's very helpful. And I'm sure that, I know I'm always hanging on to your comments. So I'm sure that our audience probably is doing the same. Dr. Stewart, thank you so much for sharing that important research with us and for answering questions and for being here today. We really appreciate you.